The biggest search for the Loch Ness Monster in more than half a century is underway this weekend in Scotland. Hundreds of people are taking part in the effort to capture evidence of Nessie's existence.
Loch Ness has been tormented by tales of a monster.
I saw the monster at 10 minutes to 10 on the 26th of May 2007.
After decades of speculation, a new scientific expedition has mapped every single inch of the lake. When the sonar found something massive moving beneath the surface, a story that had been told throughout the Scottish Highlands was changed out water. Seeing the legend up close for the first time was shocking. To understand what the researchers found, we must begin at the beginning. Even before sonar pictures and DNA tests, this serene Scottish lake had an enigmatic reputation. The legend's loch if you ever stand on the edge of Loch Ness. The first thing you will notice is not the scenery, but the stillness. The surface of the lake seems motionless, but despite the calm, there's something unsettling about it. Before vanishing into the mist near Inverness, this 23-mile stretch of water travels between steep, mist-covered hills in the Scottish Highlands. Nothing about this place is usual, even yet it looks normal from a distance. Beneath that calm surface lurks one of the deepest freshwater bodies in the world. Loch Ness dips to a depth of about 755 feet in certain areas, which is practically deeper than the North Sea. Because of its depth alone, it seems as if the ground itself created a concealing hole that is impervious to light. The loch contains more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. It is large enough to swallow entire communities without disclosing its secrets. The water itself adds to the mystery. It is dark, cold, and marred by peat from the surrounding hills. Even on a clear day, there is very little reflection from the surface. The darkness seems to cover the sky too much. As you go a few feet below the surface, sunlight completely disappears. Divers say it's like going down through layers of ink until everything is quiet. The loch moves in strange ways and echoes softly, giving the impression that it has a voice of its own. There is hardly any visibility down there. It makes obvious that anyone who has ever looked into it would experience an odd pull, as though the darkness underneath may be watching. But from the beach, Loch Ness is misleading. It appears calm, still, and perhaps even beautiful. The ripples seem harmless, and the air is soft and silent. But that calm hides something ancient. Thousands of years ago, forces powerful enough to change the land itself carved the rugged, uneven terrain below. When the last ice age ended, some 10,000 years ago, massive glaciers ripped a massive hole across the Great Glen Fault. As the ice thawed, that tunnel also filled with water, creating the current loch. Every stratum of rock below shows that nature has always ruled this location. And when you finally stand there and look into its murky waters, it's easy to understand why people began whispering about what might be there. The loch's design alone lets the imagination run wild. What might go through such black water unseen? What may have survived in an untouched trench from the Ice Age? The story of Loch Ness is rumbling somewhere in the dark hush underneath the calm exterior. This is precisely how a place intended to hide anything would look, and it's possible that modern explorers were drawn to Loch Ness out of curiosity, but ancient people approached it cautiously. Could it be that the first people to live in Loch Ness knew something that we are only now rediscovering? The Celtic myths, historical warnings long before technology, tried to unravel its mysteries. The area around Loch Ness was already communicating through legends. The ancient Celtic tribes that inhabited the water's beaches saw it as erratic rather than tranquil. They were wary, considerate, and terrified of it. For them, the loch was not a picture-perfect view, but a living thing that needed to be separated. Their stories were not meant to be humorous, but rather warnings formed by generations who learned the repercussions of defying the loch's mood. One of the most horrifying tales was that of the Kelpie, a shape-shifting sea spirit that was said to roam the shorelines in the guise of a gorgeous horse. For the typical passenger, it seemed harmless. Its coat gleams like a wet glass, and its eyes are staring at you as if inviting you inside. However, the story constantly took a darker turn. A person's hand would stick to its flesh and become immobile when they stretched out to touch it. The beast would suddenly leap into the river and carry its prey far into the dark. Silent depths where no one ever returned, to be why spreading through fear rather than fantasy. The story served as a warning to avoid things that sparkle too soon. Another story included the water horse, the Eachwish. It was said to be far more violent than the Kelpie. It always enthralls people with its strange presence, sometimes taking the form of both a horse and a man. Folklorists later recognized it as one of Celtic mythology's most fearsome animals. In the earlier stories, instead of waiting for you to approach the water's edge, it watched, waited, and intervened when you were by yourself. It was reported to be able to tear apart an adult man due to its appetite, which is as big as the loch itself. Whether or not anyone actually saw it, the idea was enough to make generations see the lake's calm surface as a warning rather than an invitation. You see, these stories were not supposed to be interesting or amusing to anyone. They talked about the strange drownings, the unexpected waves, and the people who vanished while fishing or crossing at night. These tribes coexisted without making a distinction between superstition and reality. The disappearance of anything in the dark water was more of an encounter than an accident. Every tiny impact felt personal, as though an unseen force had decided to reveal who was in control. The water was heavy. In 565 AD, the mystery surrounding Loch Ness was written down. The Irish missionary Saint Columba witnessed some people burying a man near the River Ness, the particular river that drains into the lake, while traveling through what is now Scotland. They told him that a great water beast had attacked the man while he was swimming when he asked about the occurrence. Unfazed, Columba ordered one of his followers to swim over and fetch a boat. As the man dove into the water, a massive beast appeared, its jaws wide open, and came at him. The loch's historical standing was solidified by the subsequent incident. Columba raised his hand and made the sign of the cross. "You will go no further and won't touch the man. Go back at once," he shouted. His comrades said that the beast froze, turned away, and slid back into the darkness. Saint Adamnan penned the story later, and it is still debatable. Was it a miscommunication, divine intervention, or a real encounter with something that lived deep within the loch? No one can be sure. At this particular moment, the loch's whispered fears certainly become something permanent and recorded. Centuries later, the story remains potent. Its impact is undeniable, despite historians disputing its accuracy. It transformed the loch from a mysterious location to one with deeper meaning. It became a confluence of faith, fear, and legend. People who are close to its edge continue to describe an unexplainable sensation. The air is cooler and the silence seems heavier. The stories of the Ichusage, the Kelpie, and Columba's beast all have a similar pulse, although being from different historical periods. The ocean's ability to conceal secrets seems to be an unwritten truth up until then. Faith and fear were the foundation of belief in the creature. But when a picture was added to the story, everything changed. Or maybe that's where the real trick began. The picture that misled the world. The narrative of the photograph starts in April 1934, when the world's interest in Loch Ness took a dramatic swing. One black and white photograph that appeared in newspapers across Britain would drastically change people's opinions of Loch Ness. It showed a long, slender neck emerging from the dark water, still, eerie, and almost prehistoric. For readers at the time, it was evidence rather than fiction, because photo editing was challenging in those days. Few were able to handle the necessary time, expertise, and effort as a result. When the photograph originally appeared, no one questioned its authenticity. The picture perfectly matched the stories the locals had been telling for years about a mysterious monster with a bent neck that traveled silently across the loch. The photo immediately went viral. Headlines enthralled readers from New York to London. People traveled to the Scottish Highlands to try and see what they now believed lived in those dark waters. The calm, peaceful loch suddenly became a stage, and everything appeared out of place. In addition, as tour boats began to fill, cameras focused on the mist. Before anyone realized it, the mystery had evolved into a television program that the public called Nessie. Over the next few decades, further evidence to back up the story surfaced. In 1960, amateur investigator Tim Dinsdale recorded a dark, moving object going across the lake, leaving a wide trail in its wake. The video provoked global controversy despite its blurriness. While some claimed it was a boat, others insisted it was alive. But nobody could really tell. Years later, in the 1970s, another picture surfaced. This one was supposedly a water-submerged, pale, diamond-shaped flipper. It looked like a prehistoric aquatic species called a plesiosaur. Everyone trusted it again. The mystery of Loch Ness was becoming more than simply a tale. It was becoming an empire. The story quickly served as an inspiration for books, documentaries, and other works. Toy companies made their own versions of Nessie. Filmmakers created films exploring what might be hidden deep within the loch. Sonar and cameras were installed during field trips by scientists. The loch was now more than simply water. It represented the possibility of discovery and humanity's yearning for exploration. Somewhere in the deep solitude, people longed to believe that a creature had survived the eons. Then, 60 years after the famous image, the truth began to emerge. In 1994, an elderly man named Christian Sperling made a confession that startled Christians worldwide. The image that deceived millions of people, he claimed, wasn't a monster. It was a small model that looked like a toy submarine with its sculpted head and neck. He and his stepfather, Marmaduke Wetherell, had built it themselves as retaliation against the publication that had mocked Wetherell's earlier pursuits. The epiphany felt like a kick to the gut. People who had grown up with that image felt tricked. For many years, it has represented mystery and optimism. As it turned out, it was only a clever practical joke. While some did not believe it at all, others were disappointed to accept it. They contended that the confession itself might have been a cover-up and that there had to be more to the story. The debate went on, as fiercely as before, and even after the truth was out, the fascination remained. With their cameras ready, tourists continue to go to the same stretch of black water where the monster earlier seemed to rise. The photo may have been fake, but the feeling it aroused was real. The funny thing about mysteries is that, even once they are answered, they never really die. The image may have deceived everyone, but it also served as a reminder that sometimes it's more thrilling to believe than to know. Cameras and eyewitnesses told the story of Loch Ness for many years. But what if science decides to listen instead of look? By the early 1960s, quantitative evidence was beginning to replace eyewitness reports and remote effects. Something more scientific was replacing the days of fuzzy pictures and tales from campfires. That aim led to the founding of the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, the first official agency devoted to discovering whatever had agitated those waters for years. This time, they weren't relying on binoculars or blind chance. Their weapon was sonar, a device that could see with sound and pierce where light could not. In a lake where the light disappeared very instantly and the water was black with peat, vision was worthless. But the depths could be reached by sound. The teams produced waves that bounced off of solid things by dragging sonar equipment through the sea, sending signals far larger than any known fish. The scientific community as a whole was enthralled with what they saw on their screens. Were these readings the first clues? Or were they just another illusion in a place where the senses are known to be tricked? Despite the advancements in technology, such as sonar, DNA testing, and deep water mapping, Loch Ness continues to withhold all of its mysteries. Perhaps there is something down there, or perhaps our urge to believe is the true mystery. The legend of Loch Ness will undoubtedly endure. That I appreciate your reading. Remember to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you believe that something is still hidden deep within the loch.